Yo, BQuanchi here. So today I want to talk about the newest generation of Pokemon main series games, Scarlet and Violet. The main focus about the new installment, and what would set it apart from previous titles, is that it'll be an open world game with 3 separate stories or paths that the player can take. With a recent taste of open world gameplay from Pokemon Legends Arceus, I felt like it did build a lot of hype on how that would impact the main series and how the new game would play and not be so linear. I do want to give a slight spoiler warning. Some of the main things I wanted to touch on is how these different paths affect overall progression, traversing the world, and mobility with traveling. I would honestly consider it more helpful than spoiler, but wanted to mention that as well. Also, since I don't have the means to capture my own gameplay footage for Switch, the visuals will be taken from overview trailers and such, so apologies if it's a little more generic. Later on I will also compare Scarlet and Violet to other Pokemon games such as previous generations and Legends Arceus. I do ask to consider this video to be somewhat of a video essay or commentary of my impressions and experience with the newest Pokemon game, but feel free to comment below if you agree or disagree or have additional thoughts about Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. So with playing the newest Pokemon game and asking myself, is this really an open world game? I came to the answer that it is, but also it's kind of not. It's hard to put into so few words, but wanted to talk more about this idea that was being pushed, that with this new generation, having separate stories or paths that the player is free to choose from. There's the classic path of defeating gym leaders, getting badges, and taking on the Elite Four. There's also battling the antagonist group of the game, Team Star, and there's also these Titan Pokemon and collecting Herba Medica, which are these ingredients that this character Arvin is seeking. These stories and paths are presented to the player after arriving to the school for the first time. At the beginning of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, I really enjoyed the opening before arriving to the school for the first time. As you start your journey leaving home, there is quite a bit of freedom before reaching the academy. I thought it was really cool to go off and explore, free to catch so many different types of Pokemon, and start building my dream team before even setting foot at the school. To me, it felt the same as arriving to the wild area in the previous generation, Sword and Shield. It was a very fun distraction from the main story. I feel like these ideas really enhance experience with modern Pokemon games, unlike earlier generations where you're very limited to which Pokemon you can naturally catch, and early routes of the map and all that. I just really love having so much freedom to explore and catch Pokemon, preparing myself to the start of the main story. So as I progressed, the game introduced new characters and these story paths, I decided to go with the Victory Road option. Since I played most of the main Pokemon games, I wanted to go with a more classic gym battle route. As I made my way through the Victory Road story, I started to realize that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet wasn't as open as I thought it was. I would say the overall gameplay does play like an open world game, and there's a lot of freedom of choice, but it also felt like some areas were more closed off to me. There are typical barriers that suggest or even force a certain path to follow, such as the flow of going to closer key areas or facing higher level opponents in Pokemon may deter a player from exploring different areas until later on. But there's also bigger barriers such as environments and terrains that I felt stopped me in my tracks. I would say that starting the Victory Road path is pretty open. The first gym and badge earned won't be the same for every player, even the order of the first couple of gyms can vary. But it felt to me that it got to a point that things became closed off and I had to do something else. The world map began to feel confusing and frustrating. For example, there were rivers but no bridges in sight to cross them. There were mountains, but I felt like I kept hitting dead ends and felt defeated. It could be me being impatient, or I could be an idiot, both are equally true. But instead of continuing this so-called open world with the Victory Road story, I felt it was suddenly closed off and forced me to do something else. So I decided to go through the path of Legend story and take on the Titan Pokemon. I found out with taking this path, it actually upgrades your mobility with your ride Pokemon. Also with the Herba Mystica, having an abbreviation HM, it's like the HM moves from previous games. These upgrades include a higher jump, gliding, traveling on water, and even climbing. This definitely made traveling the world a lot easier and convenient. Something that's also worth mentioning is that with Team Star, they do set up these road blockades that can close off travel, but I didn't find them to be too much of a deal and found other ways to get around that. I would say that the major benefits of pursuing the Team Star route is obtaining certain TMs and TM crafting materials, but wouldn't say this path is crucial. Honestly, it was the last path that I finished during my playthrough of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I would say that the Titan Pokemon path can be a major focus since it affects mobility and traveling, but the Victory Road and gym badges also affect catching and training higher level Pokemon. So with my first impressions of hearing about the gameplay with Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and how it's going to be more open world, and that you can choose your own adventure with separate paths, but in reality it does feel like they really intertwine and it's best to switch focus between them than just focusing on one of them. Also, you can take advantage of this backwards jump on your right Pokemon to scale mountains, but I would argue you would still at least need the high jump to really make use of this exploit. I think it says something about the game's design if the player needs to quote-unquote break the game or exploit mechanics just to traverse through the world map. I wish the game would guide, maybe even force a player to dip in the beginning of each separate path to get a good taste of the advantage of each one, especially with the Titan Pokemon in the Herba Mystica. I would say that getting the higher jump early in the game would have really enhanced my experience with it. With this open world label being slapped on Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, I personally feel that the design choices makes it vague, confusing, and frustrating, and squashes the idea that there's so much freedom in this open world game when hitting so many roadblocks. So, I want to compare the newest Pokemon game to the first Pokemon generation. Let's say in Gen 1 you do actually have separate paths, such as completing the Pokédex, becoming the Pokemon League champion, and defeating Team Rocket. If you want to travel and explore the Kanto region, you will be required to defeat gym leaders. There's roadblocks that force you to deal with Pokemon gyms and Team Rocket on your journey to catch them all. Comparing main series Pokemon games from Gen 1 to current, it's a lot less linear and there's a lot more freedom, which as a longtime player I do really appreciate. One of the biggest freedoms that I really enjoy is having so many options to build your Pokemon team without trading or transferring. While in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, it feels like there's a lot more freedom hitting key areas such as Gym, Team Star Leaders, and Titan Pokemon. It still feels like there's a lot of limitations and roadblocks on your journey. One last comparison I wanted to make with open world gameplay is comparing this game with Pokemon Legends Arceus. I do feel that Arceus does a much better job with open world than Scarlet and Violet. Even though with Arceus the world slowly opens up and certain areas aren't available until progress is made with the main story, these separate areas still felt open and clear. When playing Arceus, I didn't feel confused or frustrated with where I can and need to go. As the game introduces new ride Pokemons and mechanics, such as swimming, flying, and climbing, it feels more clear and enhances the experience of an open world becoming more open. I feel like Legends Arceus did mobility and traveling so well that I felt spoiled, and when moving on to Scarlet and Violet, it felt like a big letdown. So going back to the main question about whether Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is an open world game, I would say that it is. However, I do feel that the design choices that hinders this open world aspect and results in an unclear and frustrating experience. I do wish that the beginning of this game would have had better convenience of the benefits of each of these different paths, and how helpful it is to have them intertwine rather than being separate. Maybe it's just me and my personal experience with playing Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, but I felt confused, frustrated, and impatient when trying to travel through the world map and making progress. Also, it could just me being an idiot. That could easily be true, but I'm curious to see others if they had similar thoughts and experiences. Part of it could be with the relatively recent release of Legend Arceus and being spoiled with what really works well in an open world game. It felt baffling to me that these aspects that I enjoyed seemed to be abandoned in Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I do feel like it's a real shame because I would say that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is the best game of the main series. With the reception of this game focusing more on performance, glitches, and bugs, it seems like it's a more poorly reviewed game in the main series. I do hope this doesn't discourage Game Freak from trying new things to change up and improve the main series Pokemon games. Even though I haven't had too many technical issues myself, I do have complaints about the game's design and how this open world aspect at times feels like a letdown. With that being said, I do really enjoy Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. I feel like this is definitely a step in the right direction, but not quite there and there's definitely room for improvement. Again, let me know in the comments below what you think of the open world aspect, both good and bad, or any other thoughts about Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, and thanks so much for watching.